What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're looking at 1 Chronicles 23, 24, and 25. And today we're going to see a lot of the same thing. But the main point is David is going to organize the society so that when he's gone, they can keep obeying God. And the reason this is important is because the whole book of 1st and 2nd Chronicles is really all about comparing the kings that come after David to David. And there you might say, well, why is that important? It's important because we're going to see that David did everything that he could to leave a good legacy for the people that would follow him as king. And we're going to see Solomon, he's going to be the main focus of the next book we're looking at, 2nd Chronicles, which we're going to get to that soon. But the point is, David gets everything ready for them. And the question is, are they going to follow in David's footsteps? So in chapter 23, he organized the Levites. So this is the group of people who would make up the priests. More specifically, in chapter 24, he talks about who the priests are, kind of gives them a little bit of a genealogy. And this kind of reminds us of the beginning of the book of Chronicles, where the chronicler lists some of the people that were in the land and describes their heritage. Now we look at the priests, the Levites, and also the musicians. And these people would be serving in the temple. And they'd be serving not just in the temple, but all around to serve God through musical worship, which is interesting. Just because in the New Testament we use different instruments doesn't mean that we're not following a pattern that we see even in the Old Testament of singing praises to God. So we see some roots of that here in chapter 25. And like I said, as we continue to read, I just want you to connect these chapters to the rest of this book's story. Are the people going to follow David's example? Just because you have good teaching, just because you have good examples, doesn't mean that you are going to follow God. And we're going to see how the other kings of Israel follow that and don't always do what God says for them to do. And they don't do it as well as David does here. So that's our Old Testament reading today. Let's look at the New Testament. Super important chapters here. John chapter 11. This is probably one of the most important chapters in the New Testament because it teaches us something so important about Jesus Christ himself. So the beginning of this chapter starts out with a man named Lazarus who is sick. Now Lazarus, you might know, he is friends with Jesus, but he's also siblings with Mary and Martha. These two are very important. They come up in the Gospel of Luke. They come up in some of the other Gospels, and they're very important to this Gospel because Jesus is going to have conversations with them. In fact, this conversation doesn't actually happen between Lazarus and Jesus. That's going to come at the end of the chapter. This is just people are informing Jesus that, hey, he is sick. Lazarus is sick. Now, does Jesus need to be informed in a very special way? Well, no, because he does know everything and he's in control of the situation. And we're going to see how that plays out here in a minute. But it says that Jesus responded to them in verse 4 by saying, "This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now, if you know what's about to happen, you might say, well, did Jesus have all of his facts straight? Because it actually seems like this sickness does lead to death. And in fact, Lazarus does die. But what is he getting at? It's very important for us to understand this whole chapter. This sickness leads through death, but it doesn't end in death. And the end of this chapter, we're going to see that Lazarus is alive and well. And how is that? Well, it says that after this, in verse 5 all the way to verse 16, we have this conversation between Jesus and some of his disciples here. Jesus tells his disciples, we are called to do God's work while it's light out, while there's daytime. And now you might say, what does that have to do with anything? Well, Jesus said about himself, I am the light of the world. Basically saying, I have a job to do. As I am in this world, I have a job to do. Same thing is true with Christians after Jesus is gone. Jesus says that you have a job to do. Primarily, our job is to be witnesses of Jesus in the world. Then it says in verse 16 that Thomas, after he really starts to realize what's going on here, after Lazarus has died, and it's reported to them that Lazarus has died, it says that Thomas gets so, not upset, but Thomas has a little bit of a bad attitude right here. At least we think so. And maybe he has a good attitude, but his good attitude comes with a lot of sassiness right here. It says that in verse 16, Thomas called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us go also. Let's follow Jesus back to Jerusalem so that we may die with him." I don't think that was said purely straight tone. I think that was probably with a little bit of sarcasm. He's saying if Jesus wants to go back to Jerusalem, well, we just got run out of town in chapter 10. So just before this, they got run out of town. It says you want to go back to Bethany, which is only 2 miles away from Jerusalem. Don't you think that people might hear that Jesus is coming back? Yeah, I'm pretty sure people are going to hear about it. And when people do hear about it, we are going to be killed. And Thomas says, if we go with Jesus, we're going to die. So we get a little bit of boldness out of him, at least saying, yeah, okay, we'll be willing to die. But he is kind of being a little bit doom and gloom here, especially because of what Jesus already promised, that this sickness would not lead to death. It would lead to the glory of God. People would see the glory of God through this. Which brings up an interesting point that I think we should land on here today, that everything that happens is in God's big plan. This included Lazarus' illness, his sickness, the thing that led him to death. All of it was a part of God's plan, and ultimately God was going to bring glory to himself through what he did with it. Now you might say, well, yeah, this is a very particular situation though. This is Lazarus. We know what's going to happen to him. Tomorrow, as we read in the daily Bible reading, Jesus is going to bring him back from the dead. So why even mention this? Well, I think the point is, God is so in control that he's going to use even some of the bad things for his glory. He does that all the time, and he didn't just do that with Lazarus' situation. He does that with us too. So sometimes when there's things that are confusing and things we don't understand that are going on, we need to recognize that God is going to bring himself glory through those situations. So it's something we need to ponder, and especially if we're going through a hard time right now, you want to make sure that you are focusing on trusting the Lord, because he will work things for his glory. He's going to get glory through it. So that's all we've got. We'll see you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.